Severe weather expected on Tuesday. A slight risk in effect, with a possible upgrade to come later. Well, there we are. This is Weather Beat Special once again on Force 13, and we're talking about more US activity along the way. And indeed, there is some just over the horizon with this slight risk that's in effect that's mainly driven by hail and wind, but there is also a tornado threat in there as well. We did a few of these broadcasts back in January. We really haven't needed to do any more since because not that much has happened in the world of severe weather at all. But joining me tonight is our ever reliable team member from lovely Indianapolis. It's Ethan Bruning. Welcome aboard, and nice to have you with us again for another discussion tonight.
Thank you, Nathan. It was absolutely beautiful today. We're recording this Monday afternoon. High temperatures was a record high across most of the region today here in the Ohio Valley region, and as well across most of the northern plains. Most cities really along and east of the Mississippi River today, not as far east as say the East Coast, but a lot of the Midwestern U.S. recording record highs today. In particular, here we set a record in the mid-70s today.
Mid-70s, how about that? And here back at Force 13 HQ in the UK, it's upper 40s, which we've been having today. Looking at the national picture across the US right now, it wasn't supposed to do that, I can tell you that. Let's try and get the actual thing that I needed to show you, and it's this, which is my WSV3, which you can clearly see, and you can see everything that's going on across the US scene right now, and you can see generally quite a bit of precipitation over in the western half of the country, but to the east it's looking a little bit more sedate, apart from a few storms, or well, not really storms, but rain showers moving across southern Virginia. We've got a marginal risk out tonight, Ethan, so do you want to just talk about that briefly before we go on to tomorrow's slight risk?
Yes, I'll cover this very briefly. It's looking to be mainly a hail threat if storms end up forming. SPC doesn't have anything out on tornado and wind, but for tonight's risk, it's a main question of if storms fire, and if they do fire, how strong do they get? We don't really expect a whole lot with this activity, but it's mainly going to be areas along and east of US Route 41, from maybe the Evansville area up towards Chicago and points north. So think central Indiana, northern Kentucky, areas in central and western Ohio, as well as areas mainly along and just southeast of Interstate 69 in Michigan. Once again, mainly a hail threat. And just a question of if storms form, and if they do, it's going to be overnight, and they will produce some mainly small hail, and it's just a question of how strong those storms get as well.
Yep, nothing on the radar right now. So, getting on to tomorrow's event, Ethan, what's your biggest area of concern geographically and in terms of hazards?
So my biggest area of concern right now, you can see on my screen, Nathan, we've got this large slight risk that's heading from southeastern Missouri through central Illinois, central Indiana, Michigan. So we're of Interstate Indiana, area of Interstate 70 in Indiana. So mainly this area right here, we're talking northern Indiana, the northern half of central Indiana, I should say, as well as the areas south of, and that outlines pretty well with these Storm Protection Center's Day 2 tornado outlook. They've got a 5% tornado risk out for these areas, and that's going to be primarily, I think, the area to look for tomorrow in terms of tornadoes. Of course, not saying that we aren't going to see tornadoes elsewhere. We have this very large, broad tornado risk that does extend into Missouri and over into Cleveland, Ohio as well. Not saying that there's not going to be that the chances of tornadoes are less there versus areas that I'm seeing in northern Indiana and eastern Illinois.
Now my software's all breaking up right now, so I'm not sure how well that came out, but we did hear most of what you said, Ethan. Now, we're talking timing is going to be a little bit of a question mark. We are thinking it's going to be quite late in the day.
Yes, and that's going to be a problem. the biggest questions that we have right now regarding this event are timing and location, and it's still not even certain where these storms are going to form. You know, if if this front is up in a different spot, then these storms could form a little bit farther towards the south, and that would bring areas like Lincoln and Champaign, Illinois, as well as the Indianapolis metro back into play. Of course, they are still in play, but that would bring areas like Chicago, if it were to shift further towards the south, that brings Chicago less into play. But as equally, it could shift off back towards the north, and that could bring Chicago more into play. But in general, this is what we're looking like right now. I'll bring up the latest HRR model run. Of course, this isn't the latest run, but this is the run that can go out the farthest, I should say. And you can see here, there's tonight's marginal risk that we're seeing. Hardly any storms form in the HRR. Maybe into the morning hours of tomorrow. Not a whole lot of activity, but here we go. This is 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central tomorrow. We have nothing across the board here. And we get towards 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, still nothing. And it's only really when we get towards 2Z. So that's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. That way you start to see these showers and thunderstorms start to develop. I have to say, on this model run, it's a little bit off towards the further east than what I would expect, personally. And those do continue into central Indiana and do produce all hazards, tornadoes, damaging winds, large hail, all the primary threats with these cells. And they do continue to push off into Indiana through the overnight hours. But you'll notice here, this is 6Z. This is, just doing my math here, this is 1 a.m. Eastern,
Very
midnight
late.
Central. And you can see here the storms are in central Indiana. So this is well after dark. And I'll go to the NAM 3-kilometer run here. This is again at 18Z. And you can see it doesn't have anything for a bulk of Tuesday. And then you have, this is right at 6 p.m. Central, maybe storms firing over here in Iowa into the Quad Cities area. And those storms will continue off towards the east. And then you can see versus the HRRR here, HRRR was a lot further south along the Interstate 70 corridor. The NAM is a little bit further off towards the north. So there's still a little bit of question marks on the location of these storms.
Quite a big difference.
But you can see here once again, yeah, you can see here, this is at 4Z. So that would be 11 p.m. Eastern. So this is after dark. In these areas, and you can see here severe thunderstorms pushing on through South Bend, Fort Wayne. Just thinking of some locations up here, Lafayette, Kokomo's up here as well. Gary, Indiana, Hammond, Indiana's up here as well.
Even the initiation time for this is probably after dark.
It's looking that way in general. It could be a little bit prior to that. There is still some wiggle room in terms of the initiation time. And when storms fire will also determine the risk area that we could be seeing as well. So that is entirely subject to change and we could be looking at either a weaker scenario in 24 hours from now, or it could be stronger. There is still, as I just said, a few question marks to be answered, and those will be answered with time.
Let's talk about a tale of two cities then, Ethan. You've got Chicago, which could potentially get some activity from this, but quite often things fizzle out before they get there and people might get complacent. And you've got Indianapolis, which is you, and both of those are pretty much front and center of this event by the looks of things.
Yes, we're sort of like in the middle of this, I guess you could say. The prime area for this severe weather looks to be sort of in between us two at the moment. So primarily north of us here in Indianapolis and southeast of us in Chicago looks to be the primary reason. Not saying that whole fizzle out thing should be believed here. I mean, it does happen pretty often, I'll say, here locally. But it's best to determine that the worst is going to happen, and we could be looking at a pretty big severe weather event. You can see here the NAM 3-kilometer. You can see that at the top of the screen. That's at 3Z. Obviously, this is just one model run, so you shouldn't really take this at face value. But you can see here, this is once again at 3Z. So I'm just doing my time conversion. That would be 9 p.m. Central tomorrow.
Yeah.
A pretty big cell in the Chicago metro there, the northern area of Chicago. Not saying that's going to happen, but just saying that this is one model run and that the conditions are favorable for severe weather that far north.
And both of these are the 18Z model runs, right?
Yes, these are both the 18Z model runs. And I'll pull up another one here. I'll select, we'll just go through the list here. This is the 12Z run for this model run. This is just a random mesoscale model run that happens. And you can see here, there's those storms firing. It has a lot less activity, completely skips out on Indianapolis.
It almost looked like it wasn't going to happen at the end now.
Yeah.
Just last
Yeah, so you
minute.
can see this model run keeps things fairly limited, but you can see here, northern Indiana, that prime area for that's those multiple cells looks like that fires off, and once again, well into the overnight hours, and maybe even sort of splitting Indianapolis in two, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
Um, we'll go to another model run here. Uh, this is just one more kind of model run, and you can see here, northern Indiana, main Chicago
Wow.
Metro still in play there.
A
We'll
big
go to the
split
next
there.
one. We'll go to the next one, and you can see this one has a lot
Oh
more activity.
wow.
Has to be said. Doesn't really bring Chicago into play. Sort of does a little bit, but not in terms of severe weather. But much rather brings the Indianapolis Metro into play. This model run does, and we'll go to this model run. This is one that just came out. I don't think it runs out to the event. No, it doesn't have to go to this run here, and this model run is once again on northern Indiana. So northern Indiana appears to be the prime location for tomorrow, although things could change.
What's your hunch then? Extensive live coverage tomorrow?
I don't really know. I think that we could use at least some live coverage tomorrow. Though what exactly happens, because just knowing my area up here, there's a few cities hitting far between, but mostly up here in northern Indiana. This is mostly just farmland, to be honest. You got some big cities up there. You got Fort Wayne, you got South Bend, you got Kokomo. So there are a lot of big population centers out there, but it's sort of like in the middle of all of those is where the biggest threat is, and that's not saying that these big cities elsewhere, the cities I just mentioned, including Lafayette, or that
Yeah.
mix as well. Not saying that these northern Indiana cities aren't going to get anything, but just saying that the biggest risk for severe weather tomorrow in terms of tornadoes looks to be sort of in between all of those, in like the middle of all those. Hopefully that makes sense.
I'm going to go through the local offices in a minute. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we do that?
Just one more thing before we go to the National Weather Service offices. It's going to be very important that you have a way to receive watches and warnings tomorrow night. Yeah, that includes you can turn on emergency alert systems on your phone. If you don't know where it is in your settings, I'm sure you can look it up. There's a thing called Google. And you've also got your weather radios. I got a few in the background. I got one right here. I'll actually show it real quick. These are super easy. You can go to Walmart and buy them. They're $20-$30. They're not that expensive. And those things can they've saved multiple lives out in the plains and out in Dixie Alley. Think Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Kansas. Those kind of folks have these things on all the time during this stuff. And it's important that even during these little severe weather events that we need to expect the worst, because the most recent EF5 tornado that was back in 2013, May 20th, many people remember that was more back in that year. That wasn't even on an SBC high risk day, and they weren't really expecting much overall on that day. And look what ended up happening. So the general story that I'm trying to portray here is have a way to receive watches and warnings tonight, and always hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
And sometimes that's how it goes. So let's start off with Indianapolis then, Ethan. You've got that, I think. I don't.
Yes. Yeah, so this is what our National Weather Service office is saying here locally. Unfortunately, this is as of 3:30 this morning, so they haven't updated it somehow throughout the entire day. But this is what they're saying, and this is generally true for the whole event. This is what we know right now. Potential for showers with a few thunderstorms rain possible Tuesday and Tuesday night. We know that for certain. The pattern remains broadly supportive for potential for strong storms. That's why we have this very large flight risk area. Confidence is increasing in severe potential, while some uncertainty remains. That's the uncertainty that I was alluding to earlier. And this is what we don't know. Precise timing, coverage, and intensity. That's a little bit of question mark and still needs to be answered, and these full spectrum of hazards that may occur. So there's still a few question marks that still has to be answered, but in general, looking like things could be a bit hazardous tomorrow night across the region of central Indiana. But we're mainly looking at areas along and north of Interstate 70. So think areas like Terre Haute, Indianapolis, Muncie, Carmel, Fishers, Crawfordsville, Lafayette, areas like that and points north in terms of these weather threat across here in central Indiana.
Here's Paducah, Kentucky, and the key messages there. Strong southerly winds up on Tuesday, gusts of up to 40 miles per hour. Into the evening, a few showers or thunderstorms possible during the day. The main chance is after dark. Timing looks like anywhere from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. from northwest to southeast. Shouldn't that be the other way around? Southwest to northeast? Damage?
No, I think what
I
I
don't know.
think what they I think what they've got there for timing is pretty accurate and location too. Of course, the uncertainty is higher down there versus up here. You know,
Yes.
if they entirely get storms, it's not even guaranteed that they might get storms down there.
St. Louis
So
under
there's
that slight risk as well. Let's move on. This is the threat assessment from where are we looking at now? Lincoln, Illinois. They're looking at 2 out of 5. That's slight risk. That really bringing in these numerical risk categories a lot more in their messaging, which I think may well be a good thing. And they're talking about timing 6 till 12, scattered severe storms, 15 to 30% chance, primary threats, large hail, damaging winds, isolated tornadoes. So a large area involved there. This is the Chicago office. And once again, they're expecting scattered thunderstorms 4 till 11 on Tuesday. Once again, slight risk for large areas there, even extending as far as Rockford northwards. Damaging winds possible, a tornado or two, damaging hail. All thunderstorms can produce lightning and downpours, have multiple ways to get warnings. Stay tuned for the latest forecast updates. Storm motion, they're expected to northeast at 30 to 40 miles per hour. This is the view from northern Indiana. What office is that, Ethan?
Northern Indiana. That's literally the office name. I know that it confuses a lot of people, but the office is physically located. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere sort of like if you were to imagine like a right triangle where South Bend is the top and Fort Wayne is the right. It's sort of like at the bottom left of that.
Okay.
So I think it's some town in between Kokomo and South Bend.
All right. So they're saying the best chance of storms late Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday night. Strong to severe, I can't speak myself now. Strong to severe storms, hail up to 2-inch diameter, and damaging winds. The main threats. Isolate severe thunderstorm possible overnight tonight. That they're saying there. Greatest risk of isolated large hail tonight, 4 till 9 a.m. Eastern. Now for tornadoes, the threat level there is low to medium. Hail is medium to high. Wind is low to medium, and flooding is low. Let's move on to southern Michigan here, and this is the view from Detroit. Late tonight to Tuesday morning, they're looking at elevated showers and thunderstorms to develop overhead early Tuesday morning. Multicellular storm mode with isolated large hail to 1 inch possible. Tuesday evening, that next round of storms along a warm front. All modes of severe weather possible. Tornado can't be ruled out in the slight risk area through roughly 11 p.m. and transitioning to linear overnight. So, double 2 rounds there of potential severe thunderstorms. I just want to go to some other offices around the country right now. Wind chill advisory for parts of Montana. Some temperatures getting really down on the wind chill there. Minus 33 at Opheim tonight. Looking at mountain snow as well for parts of the Pacific Northwest, NWS Portland there. Heavy cascade snow 1 to 2 feet. And wind gusts of up to 50 miles per hour in the mountains. And windy conditions from Elko, Nevada, looking at some pretty high winds in some of those areas. Paradise Valley, 61 miles per hour expected. So quite a few other things going on around the US tonight, Ethan.
Yes, and that's primarily going to be with this front that's going to come in after all this severe weather moves through these regions. There's going to be a massive front that swoops down from Canada, and that's going to pull down with it as usual. Some snow, not as much snow as, let's say, like a big winter storm. There is going to be some snow for some areas, including my location. We could get some snow as well. But overall snow accumulation on the backside of this looks to be pretty light, as well as some coldy conditions. Thankfully, this cold is not going to last. And it looks like that I repeat, very, very quickly, we're looking like that many locations, in particular, many other locations that we're seeing just today in terms of temperatures, let me back up into the high 60s and low 70s heading into the weekend. And I know that we have a personal high forecasted of 71 on Sunday for us here. So that's just crazy.
That's impressive. I'm
roller coaster
jealous.
for a week.
I'm jealous. I want
Welcome
some
to
of
the Midwest, Nathan. Happens all the time. We're used to it here.
And on that note, Ethan, thanks for joining us. Any other comments you'd like to make quickly?
We'll have further updates on this and potential live streaming, I imagine, tomorrow.
We certainly will.
Stay tuned to your Nats Weather Service and Force 13 outlets for the latest information, and be safe and ensure that you take the necessary precautions tomorrow night.
You can find us across all social media. Search Force 13 all in text and you'll find us, as well as the website force13.com. But for now, good night from the Force 13 team here in the UK and over in Indiana. And we'll take this slight risk tomorrow as it comes. Good night.